February snow had been falling in Cleveland for the third day in a row, turning the streets into a slippery mess of ice and salt. Rose Adams stood at the kitchen window, watching the snowflakes settle on the black branches of the old oak tree in their yard. The house was quiet, too quiet for 7 in the morning. Over the past 2 months, this silence had become familiar. Philip now left for work earlier and returned later, and Emma spent most of her time in her room preparing for her final exams. Rose should have been enjoying the quiet after 15 years of teaching at a noisy high school, but instead, she felt lonely in her own home. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made her turn around. Emma was coming down, dressed in a thick sweater and jeans. School had been canceled because of the snowfall, which was rare in Cleveland. "Good morning, dear," Rose tried to sound cheerful. "Would you like some pancakes? We're not going anywhere anyway." "Mom, it's almost 8. Emma yawned and reached for the coffee maker. "Where's Dad?" "He left at 6 this morning. He said he had an important meeting." Emma frowned. "In this weather, even the schools are closed." Rose didn't answer, but inside she cringed. She had been thinking the same thing. What kind of meeting could be so important that Philip was willing to drive through a snow-covered city at 6 in the morning? The phone vibrated on the kitchen table. Rose glanced at the screen. A message from Philip. "Stuck at the office because of the weather. We'll be back late. Don't wait up for dinner." "What's wrong?" Emma noticed the change in her mother's expression. "Nothing much. Dad says he's stuck at work." But Emma was a smart girl. "Mom, remember how Dad always used to say that family is more important than work? That he would never let work come between us?" Rose remembered. She remembered many things Philip had said before, but no longer said. In his office on the 23rd floor, Philip stood at the window watching the snow cover the streets of Cleveland. The city looked clean and peaceful under the white blanket, but inside Philip, a storm was raging that he couldn't control. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The voice behind him made him turn around. Peter Reed stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. He was wearing a dark gray sweater that accentuated his brown eyes and black jeans. His hair was damp from the snow. "You didn't drive here in this weather, did you?" Philip took the coffee, their fingers touching for a moment. "I live just a few blocks away." Peter sat down in the chair across from the desk. "Plus, I knew you'd be here." "How did you know?" "Because you're running away." Peter took a sip of coffee, never taking his eyes off Philip. "Just like me." Philip felt his heart beat faster. In the 4 months he had worked with Peter, he had grown accustomed to his directness, but it still caught him off guard. "I'm not running away. I just have a lot of work to do." "Philip," Peter put his glass down on the table and leaned forward. "My case has been closed for 2 weeks. The charges have been dropped. The money has been returned. Why are you still seeing me?" The question hung in the air between them. Philip knew the answer, but he couldn't say it out loud. He couldn't even admit to himself that for the past 2 months, he had lived only for these meetings, these stolen hours in the company of a man who made him feel alive. "I think we need to talk about professional ethics," Philip said, stepping away from the window and sitting down at the table, trying to create some physical distance. "To hell with professional ethics." Peter stood up and walked over to the table. "I haven't been your client for 2 weeks. I'm here because I want to be here, with you." Philip looked at him, and Peter saw the struggle in his eyes, between desire and duty, between truth and lies, between who he was and who he wanted to be. "I have a family," Philip finally said. "I know." Peter walked around the table and stopped next to Philip's chair. "And I know it's hard, but I also know that you feel the same way I do." Philip closed his eyes. "Peter, I can't." "You can." Peter touched his shoulder gently. "You can be honest with yourself at least." When Philip opened his eyes, he saw in Peter's face an understanding he hadn't seen in anyone's eyes in many years. No judgment, no demands, just simple acceptance. "I don't know what to do," Philip admitted. "You don't have to decide anything right now." Peter took his hand off Philip's shoulder. "But stop running away from yourself. It's destroying you from the inside." That evening, Rose sat in the living room, checking her students' notebooks. Snow continued to fall outside the window, creating a cozy atmosphere, but she couldn't concentrate on her work. Her thoughts kept returning to Philip. In 20 years of marriage, she had learned to read his moods and knew all his habits and quirks. And in recent months, she had seen changes she couldn't explain. He had become distracted, often looking at his phone and smiling to himself. He had become more attentive to his appearance, bought new clothes, and started using a different cologne. "Mom, can we talk?" Emma appeared in the living room doorway. "Of course, dear." Rose put down her notebooks and patted the sofa next to her. Emma sat down and was silent for a moment, searching for the right words. "Mom, do you and Dad still love each other?" The question caught Rose off guard. "Of course, dear, why do you ask?" "You just don't talk like you used to, and Dad is always at work. And when he's home, he seems absent." Rose hugged her daughter. "Adult relationships are complicated, Emma. Sometimes people go through difficult periods, but that doesn't mean they don't love each other." "But you'll get through this, won't you?" Rose kissed her daughter on the top of her head. "Of course," she said, but deep down, she wasn't sure that was true. At 10:30 in the evening, Philip finally came home. Rose was already in bed, but she wasn't asleep. She heard him come up the stairs, open the bedroom door carefully, trying not to wake her. "How are you?" she asked in the dark. Philip paused, taking off his tie. "I thought you were asleep." "I can't sleep. I'm worried about you." "Don't be. It's just a lot of work." Rose turned on the lamp on her bedside table. "Philip, can we talk?" "Rose, I'm tired. Maybe tomorrow?" "Tomorrow you'll leave early and come home late again." She sat up in bed. "What's going on? And don't tell me it's nothing. I'm not blind." Philip sat down on the edge of the bed without turning to face her. "I don't know what you want to hear." "The truth." Rose moved closer to him. "In 20 years of marriage, we've always told each other the truth, even when it hurt." Philip finally turned to her. There was fatigue in his eyes, but also something else. Guilt, fear, confusion. "Rose, there are things I can't explain, not even to myself." "Try." She took his hand. "We can work through anything if we're honest with each other." Philip looked at their intertwined fingers. 20 years ago, he was sure that this hand would be the only one he would ever want to hold. Now he was no longer sure of anything. "I met someone," he began slowly. "A client, and he made me think about things I've never thought about before." Rose felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of things?" "About who I really am, about what I want out of life, about whether I'm happy." Are you happy?" Philip released her hand and stood up. "I don't know, Rose. I honestly don't know." 3 weeks had passed since that snowy night, when Philip confessed that he didn't know if he was happy. Since then, the atmosphere in the Adams house had become even more tense, as if everyone was walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing. Rose stood at the window in the teacher's lounge, watching her colleagues discuss their plans for spring break. Normally, she would have joined the conversation, but now her mind was preoccupied with something else entirely. Last night, she had found a check from a restaurant in the city center in Philip's jacket pocket, an expensive place they hadn't been to in years. The check was for 2, but she knew for sure that Philip hadn't taken her there. "Rose, you look preoccupied." Jennifer Parker, Rose's math teacher and close friend, approached her with a cup of coffee. "Just tired," Rose tried to smile. "Emma is preparing for her final exams, and there's constant tension at home." "How's Philip? Haven't seen him at school events in a while?" "He's working a lot," was the standard answer Rose had been giving for several months. Jennifer looked at her friend intently. "Rose, if you need to talk, I'm always here for you." "Thanks." Rose squeezed her friend's hand. "I might need that soon." At that moment, Philip was sitting in his office trying to focus on his paperwork, but his thoughts kept returning to Peter. They hadn't seen each other in 4 days, the longest period in the last 2 months. Philip had tried to create some distance, realizing that their relationship had gone too far, but Peter's absence only intensified his longing. The phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Philip Adams speaking." "Hi, it's Peter. I'm calling from my work phone." Philip's heart began to race. "Peter, I thought we agreed to take a break." "I need to see you," Peter said insistently. "Tonight. It's important." "I can't. Rose is waiting for me at home." "Philip, please, just an hour. I'll wait at the place by the lake where we were last time." Philip closed his eyes. He knew he should say no, but he couldn't. "Okay, 7 o'clock. Rose came home earlier than usual and was surprised to find Emma in the kitchen preparing dinner. "What's the surprise?" Rose kissed her daughter on the cheek. "I wanted to help." Emma stirred something in the pan. "Plus, I needed a break from studying." "What are you making?" "Spaghetti with sauce. Remember how Dad taught me to make this sauce when I was 10? Rose remembered. It was one of their family rituals, Sunday cooking lessons with Dad. Philip always said that cooking was an art that had to be learned with love. "Will Dad be home for dinner?" Emma asked. "I think so. He didn't say he'd be late." But at 6:30, a message came from Philip. "Running late at work. Start without me." Emma read the message over her mother's shoulder. "Work again?" "I guess so." Rose put her phone down, but her voice sounded disappointed. "Mom, does Dad really work that much? I mean, he always used to make time for the family." Rose looked at her daughter and saw the same anxiety in her eyes that she felt herself. "Let's have dinner, dear. We'll talk about something nice." But during dinner, the conversation was awkward. Both were thinking about the empty chair at the table. Philip stood on the shore of Lake Erie, watching the waves crash against the rocks. The February wind was cold, but he didn't feel the cold. All his attention was focused on the approaching figure. Peter walked up to him silently and stood beside him. For a while, they just stared at the water. "Thanks for coming," Peter finally said. "I shouldn't have come," Philip said, not turning to face him. "We're playing with fire." "I know," Peter said, turning to face him, "but I can't pretend there's nothing between us anymore." Philip finally looked at him. "Peter, I've been married for 20 years. I have a daughter who loves me. I can't just—" "I'm not asking you to leave your family." Peter took a step closer. "I just want you to be honest with yourself. And with me." "Honest about what?" "About how you feel when we're together. About why you're here despite all your principles." Philip turned away toward the lake. "I don't know what I feel. I'm confused." "Then let me help you figure it out." Peter took his hand. Philip didn't pull away. "When I was a teenager," Peter began quietly, "I thought there was something wrong with me. I dated girls, tried to be who I thought I was supposed to be, but it felt like I was playing a role." "Peter, let me finish." Peter squeezed his hand. "I spent years trying to be someone else. I got married, got divorced, tried to live up to expectations, and it wasn't until I was 35 that I realized I was wasting the only life I had being miserable." "And what did you do?" "I made a decision to be myself, the real me. And you know what? For the first time in my life, I felt free." Philip looked at their intertwined fingers. "But you didn't have a family that depended on you." "No," Peter agreed. "I didn't. But I also didn't have what you have, the ability to love and be loved for who I really am." "Rose loves me," Philip said, pulling his hand away. "She loves the person you pretend to be," Peter said, turning to face him. "She loves the version of you that you created to live up to expectations. But does she know the real you?" The question hung in the air between them. Philip knew Peter was right. Rose loved her husband, her father, the lawyer, the pillar of the community. But did she know about his doubts, his secret dreams, how he felt when he woke up in the middle of the night and realized this wasn't his life? "What do you want from me?" Philip asked. "I want you to try being yourself, at least with one person in this world." Peter took a step closer. "I want you to allow yourself to feel what you feel without judging yourself for it. What if I can't? What if it destroys everything I've built? Then you'll know that you at least tried to be honest." Peter touched his face. "And if you don't try, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been." Philip closed his eyes, feeling Peter's touch. In that moment, all his defenses crumbled. He leaned in and kissed Peter. It was their first kiss, and it changed everything. When they pulled apart, Philip felt tears running down his cheeks. "What now?" he asked. "Now you know," Peter said, hugging him. Now you know who you are. At 9:30, Philip returned home. The house was quiet, but the light was on in the living room. He found Rose on the sofa with a book in her hands. "How are you?" she asked, without looking up from her book. "Fine." Philip sat down in the armchair opposite her. "Sorry I missed dinner." "Emma made your favorite sauce." Rose finally looked at him. She was very upset. "I'll talk to her in the morning." "Philip." Rose put down her book. "I need to ask you something." Philip's heart began to race. "Yes?" "Yesterday I found a check from Palazzo Restaurant in your jacket pocket. For two. Do you want to explain?" Philip felt himself blushing. It was a business lunch. An $80 business lunch with wine? "Rose, I don't understand what you're getting at." "I'm getting at the fact that you're lying to me." Rose stood up from the couch. "And not just about that dinner. You're lying about your late meetings, about why you're so distracted, about why you don't want to be intimate with me anymore." Rose. "No," she raised her hand. "Let me finish. I've been your wife for 20 years. I know you better than anyone, and I know when you're lying." Philip stood up and walked over to her. "Rose, please, I need time to figure some things out." "What things? That you don't love me anymore?" "No!" Philip took her hands. "I love you. I've always loved you." "But..." Philip looked into her eyes and saw the pain he had caused her. "But I don't know if that's enough." Rose pulled her hands away and took a step back. "What does that mean?" "It means that I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want out of life. And until I figure that out, I can't be the husband you deserve." "And in the meantime, you're having dinner with someone else in expensive restaurants?" Philip didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. "Who is she?" Rose asked quietly. "Rose, it's not what you think." "Then what is it? Explain it to me, because I'm going crazy trying to figure out what's happening to my family." Philip looked at his wife, the woman who had given birth to his child, who had supported him through difficult times, who loved him unconditionally. And he realized he couldn't tell her the truth. Not now. Maybe never. "I need to think," he said finally. "I need time." "How much time?" "I don't know." Rose nodded, as if she had expected that answer. "Okay, but while you're thinking, remember that you have a daughter who loves you, and that you have a wife who is tired of half-truths and unspoken words." She headed for the stairs, but stopped at the first step. "Philip?" "Yes?" "If you decide you don't want to be here, please tell me honestly. Don't make me guess." She went upstairs, leaving Philip alone in the living room. The next day, Rose asked her school principal for a day off. She couldn't concentrate on her work, knowing that her marriage was falling apart before her eyes. Instead, she got in her car and drove downtown to Philip's office. She didn't know what she was going to do, but she knew she couldn't sit at home and wait any longer. She parked across the street from her husband's office and waited. At 11:30, she saw Philip coming out of the building. He wasn't alone. Walking beside him was a man of medium height with dark hair, dressed in jeans and a leather jacket. They walked close together, and there was something in their body language that made Rose's heart sink. She watched as they got into Philip's car and drove away. She watched her husband smile at this man in a way he hadn't smiled at her in months. And in that moment, she knew her suspicions were correct. She was wrong about one important detail, though. Rose sat in her car for another half hour after Philip drove away with the stranger. Her hands were shaking when she finally started the engine. The world she had known for 20 years had collapsed in a few seconds of watching. She didn't go home, but to Lake Erie, the same place where Philip had kissed Peter for the first time last night. Rose didn't know it, but something subconsciously drew her to the water, to a place where she could think. She sat down on a bench and tried to make sense of what she had seen. All the oddities of the last few months suddenly made sense. The new clothes, the changed habits, the distance in bed, that special light in his eyes when he was on the phone. But the most painful realization was that the man she had lived with for 20 years was a complete stranger to her. Her phone vibrated. A message from Philip. "I'll be late. Important meeting." Rose looked at the screen and laughed for the first time in months. A bitter, painful laugh. "Important meeting." At least he wasn't lying about that. She dialed the number of the only person she could trust. "Jennifer, it's Rose. Can we meet? I really need to talk." An hour later, they were sitting in a quiet cafe in the University District. Jennifer ordered coffee for them and waited patiently for Rose to find the words. "I think my husband is gay," Rose finally said, surprised at how strange the words sounded out loud. Jennifer slowly placed her cup on the saucer. "Oh my God, Rose! I saw him today, with a man, and the way they were together." Rose shook her head. "I was such a fool. All these months I thought he was having an affair with a woman." "Are you sure you saw him?" "Absolutely." Rose looked out the window at the students passing by. "You know what the worst part is? Part of me feels relieved. At least now I know it's not me. It's not that I'm not good enough or attractive enough. Rose, it's not your fault, not at all. But 20 years of my life," Rose's voice faltered. 20 years of thinking I knew the man I slept with. 20 years of him lying to me every day." "Maybe he wasn't lying," Jennifer said cautiously. "Maybe he didn't know himself." "He didn't know?" Rose turned to her friend. "Jennifer, people don't become gay at 45. They just stop pretending." "What are you going to do?" Rose was silent for a long time, thinking about the question. "I don't know. For the first time in my life, I have no idea what to do." At that moment, Philip and Peter were walking along a deserted beach in Mentor on the Lake, half an hour's drive from the city. After yesterday's kiss, something had changed between them. The tension had disappeared, giving way to a new closeness. "What are you thinking about?" Peter asked, noticing Philip's pensive expression. "That I've made an irreparable mistake." Philip stopped and looked at the lake. "A mistake? I married a woman I love, but not as she deserves. I became the father of a child who believes I'm a hero. I built a life on a lie." Peter took his hand. "Philip, you didn't lie. You just didn't know the truth about yourself." "Isn't that the same thing?" "No." Peter stopped and turned to face him. "A lie is when you know the truth but say something else. You sincerely tried to be who you thought you should be. But the result is the same." Philip pulled his hand away. "Rose wasted the best years of her life on a man who can't give her what she wants." "What does she want?" "She wants to be loved, truly loved, the way they love in movies and books." "And you don't love her?" Philip thought long and hard about his answer. "I love her as a person, as the mother of my child, as my life partner. But I'm not in love with her. Maybe I never was." "So what are you going to do?" "I have to tell her the truth," Philip said, sitting down on a large rock that had been washed up on the shore. "She deserves to know the truth." "And then?" "Then our family will fall apart," Philip said, covering his face with his hands. "Emma will hate me, Rose will hate me, and I won't be able to blame them." Peter sat down next to him. "Philip, look at me." Philip raised his head. "You think a family built on lies is better than a broken family built on truth?" "For Emma, yes. She's 17. She's getting ready for college. This isn't the time for divorce and family drama. When is the time? When she's 30? 40? Peter took his hand. "Kids are smarter than we think. She already senses that something's wrong." "How do you know?" "Because I was that kid." Peter looked at the water. "My parents tried to stay married for me too. I saw them pretending to be happy. I felt the tension in the house. And you know what the worst part was?" "What?" "That I thought it was because of me. That if I wasn't there, they would be happy." Philip looked at Peter with new understanding. "What happened?" "They divorced when I was 20. And you know what? For the first time in years, I saw them both happy, separately. But you're not gay? No, that's a different story. But I realized that honesty, even painful honesty, is better than a beautiful lie." Philip stood up and walked to the edge of the water. "I'm so afraid of losing her." "Emma?" "Yes. Rose is a grown woman. She'll get over it. She'll find someone who loves her the way she deserves to be loved. But Emma will get over it too," Peter said, coming up beside him. "And in the end, she'll respect you for your honesty. What if she doesn't? Then you'll know you did the right thing, even if it was painful." They stood in silence, listening to the sound of the waves. Finally, Philip turned to Peter. "I'll tell her tonight." "Are you sure?" "No, but you're right. She deserves to know the truth." Peter hugged him. "Do you want me to be there?" "No," Philip shook his head. "This is something I have to do myself." Emma was home alone when Rose returned from her meeting with Jennifer. The girl was sitting at the kitchen table with her textbooks, but Rose noticed that she was looking out the window more than at her books. "Hi, sweetie." Rose hung up her coat and sat down across from her daughter. "How are you?" "Fine." Emma closed her book. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you and Dad getting divorced?" The question caught Rose off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Because you don't talk to each other anymore, because Dad is never home. Because when he is home, you both look unhappy." Rose looked at her daughter and saw not a child, but an almost grown woman who had seen more than she wanted to show. "Emma, adults sometimes have problems." "Mom, please don't talk to me like I'm a child," Emma interrupted her. "I'm almost 18. I can see what's going on. Just tell me the truth." Rose stared at her daughter for a long time, fighting the urge to protect her and the realization that Emma was indeed old enough to know the truth. "We're going through a difficult period," she finally said. "Daddy is trying to figure out some things about himself." "What things?" "He has to tell you himself." Emma nodded, accepting the answer. "What about you? How are you?" Rose felt tears welling up in her throat. "Honestly, I don't know. I feel lost." Emma stood up and hugged her mother. "Mom, whatever is going on between you and Dad, know that I love you both. And whatever you decide, I'll be fine." Rose hugged her daughter tighter, wondering when Emma had become so wise. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot to me." At 8 o'clock in the evening, Philip finally came home. Rose was sitting in the living room waiting for him. Emma was upstairs, supposedly doing her homework, but Rose suspected that her daughter was trying to give them privacy. "I need to talk to you," Philip said without even saying hello. "Me too," Rose replied. They sat down across from each other like two strangers preparing for important negotiations. "Do you want to start?" Philip asked. "No," Rose shook her head. "You talk, but this time tell me the truth, the whole truth." Philip took a deep breath. "Rose, I'm gay." The words hung in the air between them. Rose felt a strange sense of relief at finally hearing what she already knew. "I know," she said quietly. Philip looked at her in surprise. "You know? I saw you today with him, that man." Philip closed his eyes. "Rose, How long have you known?" she asked. "I didn't know." Philip opened his eyes. "I mean, maybe I suspected, but I didn't allow myself to think about it. Until recently." "Until him?" "Yes, until Peter." "Peter," Rose repeated the name. "Your client, former client. And you're in love with him?" Philip was silent for a long time. "Yes," he finally admitted. "Yes, I'm in love with him." Rose nodded, as if it confirmed what she already knew. "Have you ever loved me? Really loved me?" "Rose, of course." "No?" She raised her hand. "Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me the truth. Have you ever been in love with me the way you're in love with him now?" Philip looked at the woman he had lived with for 20 years and realized he owed her that honesty. "No," he said quietly. "I loved you, but not like that. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Rose." Rose felt something break inside her, not her heart, but rather the illusions she had cherished for years. "So our marriage was a lie," she said, stating it as a fact rather than a question. "Not a lie." Philip leaned toward her. "I sincerely wanted to be a good husband. I sincerely tried to love you the way you deserve. But you couldn't. But I couldn't." They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Rose spoke. "What now?" "I don't know." Philip shrugged. "I think we need to get a divorce." "What about Emma?" "We'll tell her the truth, together. She'll be devastated." "Yes," Philip agreed. "She will. But she'll be okay. She's strong, like her mother." Rose looked at him. "Philip, I'm angry with you. Very angry. But I also understand that you're not to blame for who you are." but I am to blame for marrying you without knowing myself. Maybe. Or maybe you did what you had to do at the time. Rose stood up. I need time to think about everything. Rose? Yes? I'm really sorry. For the pain I've caused you. For the years you've wasted. Rose turned to him. They weren't wasted, Philip. We have Emma. And we had good moments, even if they were based on half-truths. She headed for the stairs, but stopped. Philip? Yes? Next time you get into a relationship, be honest from the start. With yourself and with the other person. I will. Good. Rose climbed a few steps, then turned around. And Philip, no matter what, I want you to be happy, truly happy. With that, she went upstairs, leaving Philip alone with the realization that his life had changed forever. A week had passed since Philip had confessed the truth to Rose. It was a week of strange truce, as they both tried to adjust to their new reality. Rose slept in the guest room, Philip continued to go to work, and Emma pretended not to notice the tension in the house. They never found the right moment to talk to their daughter. Every time they tried, something got in the way. A phone call, Emma's homework, or simply a lack of courage. On Monday morning, everything changed. Rose was making breakfast when the doorbell rang. Standing on the doorstep was an unfamiliar middle-aged man in an expensive suit. Mrs. Adams, my name is Richard Thompson. I represent Mrs. Margaret Reed. I'm sorry, I don't know any Mrs. Reed. Rose frowned. She is Peter Reed's mother. Your husband would know her. Rose's heart sank. What do you want? May I come in? I'm afraid I have some bad news. A few minutes later, Thompson was sitting in their living room, and Rose was calling Philip. He came down the stairs, tying his tie, but stopped when he saw the stranger. Mr. Adams, we need to talk. Thompson stood up. This concerns Peter Reed and your special relationship with him. Philip turned pale. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that my client's mother knows about your relationship, and she has no intention of putting up with a married man corrupting her son. Corrupting him? Rose stood up. Wait, what are you talking about? Thompson took a folder of photographs out of his briefcase. Mrs. Adams, I'm afraid you need to see this. The photographs had been taken with a telephoto lens. Philip and Peter in a cafe, kissing by the lake, holding hands on the beach. The private investigator had done a professional job. Rose looked at the pictures and felt something change inside her. It was one thing to know about her husband's affair, but it was quite another to see the evidence. What do you want? Philip asked hoarsely. Mrs. Reed wants you to cease all contact with her son, immediately. Otherwise, these photos will appear in newspapers on the internet and will be sent to your clients, colleagues, and neighbors. You can't do that. Philip clenched his fists. Oh, we can. Mrs. Reed is an influential woman in this town. She won't let her reputation be damaged by your son's vicious tendencies. Peter is a grown man, Rose said, surprising herself by coming to his defense. He can date whoever he wants. Thompson turned to her. Mrs. Adams, your husband is a married man. What he is doing is called adultery, and in the conservative society of Cleveland, that can ruin a career. How much? Philip asked. Excuse me? How much money does your client want? This isn't about money, Mr. Adams. It's about morality. Mrs. Reed wants her son to marry and give her grandchildren. Your influence is preventing that. Rose looked at the photos again. Philip looked happy in them, happier than she had seen him in years. Leave, she said quietly. Mrs. Adams? Get out of my house, now. Thompson gathered the photos. You have 48 hours. If your husband doesn't end his relationship with Peter Reed by Wednesday, these photos will be made public. After he left, Philip and Rose sat in the living room in complete silence. What are you going to do? Rose finally asked. I don't know, Philip said, holding his head in his hands. If those photos appear in the newspapers, my career is over. Our family will be a laughingstock. What if you stop seeing Peter? Then I'll lose the only person who makes me feel alive. Rose stood up and walked over to the window. You know what's funny? I was ready to let you go. I was ready to go through a civilized divorce, to stay friends for Emma's sake. But these people are turning our private life into a circus. Rose, no, let me finish, she turned to him. In those photos, you look happy, really happy. And it hurts me to admit it, but I haven't seen that look on your face in years. What are you trying to say? I'm trying to say that I won't let some hypocrites dictate how we live our lives. That evening, Rose went to see Emma. Her daughter was sitting at the table, not doing anything, just staring out the window. Emma, we need to talk. About the divorce? How did you know? Mom, I'm not stupid. Dad's sleeping in the guest room. You're avoiding each other. And this morning, a man with a briefcase came to the house. Plus, I've heard you crying at night. Rose sat down on the bed next to her daughter. Emma, there are things about your father and us that you need to know. Is he seeing someone else? Yes, but not a woman. Emma slowly turned to her mother. What? Your father is gay, sweetheart. He's in love with a man. Emma was silent for a few minutes, processing the information. What happens now? We're getting divorced, but we wanted to do it quietly, without any drama. Unfortunately, there are people who want to turn our family drama into a public spectacle. Because Dad's gay? Yes. Emma stood up and walked over to the window. You know what's strange? I'm not surprised. He seemed so distant these past few months, like he was pretending to be someone else. Are you angry with him? I don't know, Emma shrugged. I'm sad that our family is falling apart. But if Dad is gay, it's not his fault, right? He didn't choose to be that way. Rose hugged her daughter. You're an amazing girl, you know that? Mom, what if those people publish the photos? Then we'll have to deal with the consequences together. Wednesday came too quickly. Philip hadn't heard from Peter in 2 days, and it was driving him crazy. At noon, Thompson called him. Mr. Adams, time is running out. What's your decision? Go to hell. Philip hung up. An hour later, the photos appeared on the local newspaper's website under the headline, Family Values, Prominent Cleveland Lawyer Leading a Double Life. By evening, the story had spread throughout the city. The Adams phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, neighbors, colleagues. Rose turned off the home phone and told everyone to ignore their cell phones. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Peter arrived at their house. Rose opened the door and saw the man who was destroying her family for the first time. Mrs. Adams, my name is Peter. I need to see Philip. He's upstairs. Rose stepped back, letting him into the house. Peter? Yes? Did you know about his family when it all started? Peter looked her in the eyes. Yes, I did. And I'm sorry it turned out this way. Do you love him? Yes, very much. Rose nodded. Then go to him. He's in a lot of pain right now. Peter went upstairs and found Philip in his bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with a bottle of whiskey. Philip, did you see? Philip didn't look up. Yes, I saw. My career is over. Half my clients have already dropped me. The rest will be gone by tomorrow. Peter sat down next to him. I'm sorry, it's my fault. No, Philip finally looked at him. It's because of us. And you know what? I don't care. Let the whole world know who I am. Philip, you're drunk. Not yet, but I'm working on it. Philip took another sip. Peter, I want to be with you, officially, no matter what. What about your family? Rose is strong. She'll be fine. And Emma said she loves me no matter who I am. Peter took the bottle from Philip's hands. Then let's start over. Right, this time. They were kissing when Rose burst into the house. Philip, come downstairs quickly. They ran down the stairs and found Rose at the living room window, looking out onto the street. There's a crowd, she said. About 30 people with signs. They're demanding that you leave the neighborhood. Philip went to the window. Sure enough, a crowd of neighbors had gathered outside with signs reading, Protect Family Values, and Perverts Don't Belong in Our Neighborhood. Where's Emma? He asked. At a friend's house. I sent her there when this madness started. Someone threw a rock at the window. The glass cracked but didn't break. Philip, you have to leave, Rose said. Now, before they break into the house. I'm not leaving you alone with these lunatics. I'm not alone, Rose looked at Peter. I have more reason to hate them than they have reason to hate you. Go, I'll call the police. Philip hesitated, but Peter took him by the arm. Rose is right. We need to get out of here. They headed for the back door, but the crowd had already surrounded the house. The shouts grew louder and more aggressive. "Come out, you pervert! Show your face!" "Get out of our neighborhood." Rose stood in the hallway, holding a kitchen knife in her hand. Her heart was beating so fast she was afraid she would pass out. 20 years of a quiet life had not prepared her for this nightmare. The sound of breaking glass in the living room made her jump. The crowd was getting more aggressive. Philip was coming down the stairs when he heard Rose's voice. "Stop! Don't move!" He turned and saw his wife with a knife in her hand, her face contorted with rage. "Rose, what are you doing? 20 years!" she screamed, her voice filled with the pain of all those months. 20 years I've been the perfect wife, the perfect mother. And for what? To become a laughingstock for the whole town? Rose, please put the knife down. No! She took a step toward him. Because of you and your perverted desires, our daughter can't go to school. Because of you, I'll have to leave the town where I've lived my whole life. Rose, we can talk about this. Talk? She laughed hysterically. There's nothing to talk about. Philip tried to approach her but tripped on a step. As he fell, he hit his head on the sharp corner of a marble table in the hallway. The sound was quiet but final. Rose dropped the knife and ran to him. Philip! Philip! He lay motionless, blood slowly spreading across the marble floor. No, no, no! Rose knelt down beside him, but there was no pulse. Outside, the crowd continued to shout, unaware that their problem had just been solved. Detective Janet Cole arrived at the scene 20 minutes after the call. A 50-year-old woman with gray hair and piercing blue eyes. She had been with the Cleveland Police Department for 25 years and had seen it all. But this case immediately struck her as unusual. The crowd at the Adams house had dispersed by then, frightened away by the sirens of police cars and ambulances. Rose sat on the steps of the porch, wrapped in a blanket given to her by one of the officers. Her eyes were dry, but empty. Mrs. Adams? I'm Detective Cole. Can you tell me what happened? Rose slowly raised her head. He fell. Philip fell and hit his head. Tell me more. What happened before he fell? There was a crowd outside. They were shouting and throwing rocks. We were scared. Philip was coming down the stairs and tripped. Detective Cole wrote this down in her notebook. Mrs. Adams, the officers reported that you were holding a knife when they entered the house. Can you explain why? Rose hesitated for a moment. I was scared. The crowd was getting more aggressive. I took the knife to defend myself. I see. Where is your daughter now? At a friend's house. I sent her there when this started. Detective Cole examined the scene. The marble table did indeed have a sharp corner with blood on it. Philip lay nearby in an unnatural position. Shards of glass from the broken window lay scattered around him. Mrs. Adams, I know this is a difficult time, but I need to ask you a few questions about your relationship with your husband. What does that have to do with the accident? I read today's newspapers. I know about the photos. Rose pulled the blanket tighter around herself. Yes, we were going through a difficult period. Did you know about your husband's affair? Yes, he told me himself a week ago. And how did you react? Rose was silent for a long time. I was shocked, upset, but we agreed to divorce amicably for our daughter's sake. And today, did you and your husband argue before he fell? No, Rose lied. We were just trying to figure out what to do about the crowd outside. Detective Cole noticed a slight hesitation in the woman's voice, but decided not to press her for now. Okay. Where is your husband's friend now? Peter? He was here when the crowd started, but he left through the back door when it became clear that the situation was getting out of hand. Do you have his contact information? No, but you can find him through Philip's office. An hour later, Detective Cole found Peter Reed at his apartment. The man looked shaken and couldn't believe what had happened. It's my fault, he repeated. If it weren't for me, none of this would have happened. Mr. Reed, tell me about your relationship with Philip Adams. Peter told the whole story from their first meeting at the office to Philip's confession to his family. He was honest about everything, including the intimate side of their relationship. Mr. Reed, when was the last time you saw Mr. Adams alive? Tonight? We were at his house when this thing with the crowd started. Rose told us to leave, and we headed for the back door. You? Me and Philip. But the crowd surrounded the house. I managed to get through the neighbor's yard, but Philip went back into the house. Did you hear what happened in the house after you left? I heard screams. I thought it was the crowd outside. Then the police arrived. Detective Cole returned to the station with a feeling that something wasn't right. She studied the photos from the crime scene, the witness statements, and the medical report. Emma Adams arrived home late in the evening, accompanied by her friend's family. Seeing the police tape around the house, she knew something terrible had happened. "Mom!" She rushed to Rose, who was still sitting on the front steps. "Emma, honey," Rose hugged her daughter. "Where's Daddy? What happened?" Rose looked into her daughter's eyes and knew she had to tell her the truth, at least part of it. "Daddy died, honey. It was an accident." Emma began to cry, and Rose felt something inside her break completely. Not her heart. That had been broken months ago. Something else. The last remnants of the woman she had been before this nightmare. The next day, Detective Cole received the autopsy results. Philip Adams died from a traumatic brain injury sustained from being struck with a blunt object. The corner of the marble table could indeed have caused such damage, but there was something else. "Detective Cole?" Medical examiner Dr. Harris entered her office with an additional report. "What do you have, Doc?" "An interesting detail. There are defensive wounds on Mr. Adams's hands, small cuts, as if he tried to defend himself from a knife." Detective Cole looked up from her documents. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. Someone was waving a knife at him shortly before he died. But his wife said she was holding the knife to protect herself from the crowd. Possibly. But these wounds indicate that there was a confrontation between Mr. Adams and the person with the knife." Detective Cole drove back to the Adams house. Rose was in the living room trying to clean up the broken window. "Mrs. Adams, I need to ask you a few more questions." "I already told you everything." "Not everything. The medical examiner found defensive wounds on your husband's hands, knife cuts." Rose froze with a piece of glass in her hand. "I don't understand." "Mrs. Adams, what really happened in this house when your husband died?" Rose slowly sat down on the sofa. She was silent for a long time, staring at her hands. "You don't understand," she finally said. 20 years. 20 years I was the perfect wife. I cooked, cleaned, raised a daughter, supported his career. And for what? To find out that all this time he was pretending? Mrs. Adams. "No, let me finish." Rose raised her head, and the detective saw in her eyes the pain that had been building up for years. "When I found out the truth, I wanted to be understanding. I wanted to do everything right. But then these photos appeared, this crowd, and I realized that I would become a laughingstock for the whole town." "What happened tonight?" "He was coming down the stairs, happy. Do you know what he said to me? That he wanted to be with this man officially, that he was starting a new life. And I thought, what about me? What about my life? What about my daughter?" Detective Cole remained silent, allowing the woman to speak. "I grabbed a knife," Rose continued, "not to defend myself from the crowd. I was so angry. 20 years of my life wasted. And he tells me about a new love, a new life, as if I'm just an obstacle that needs to be removed." "What happened next?" "I yelled at him. I waved the knife around. He tried to get closer to calm me down. And then he stumbled. Trying to get away from the knife, he stumbled and fell." Rose began to cry. "I didn't want to kill him. I just wanted him to understand what he was doing to me, to all of us. Mrs. Adams, I have to read you your rights." "Wait." Rose wiped her tears. "Can I see Emma? Can I tell her the truth? She deserves to know the truth." Detective Cole nodded. "Of course." Emma came down the stairs when her mother called her. Seeing the detective, she stopped. "Mom?" "Emma, honey, sit down. I have something to tell you." Rose told her daughter the whole truth. About the years of unhappiness, about discovering Philip's orientation, about the blackmail, about the mob, and about what had happened in the hallway. "I didn't want him to die," she finished. "I just couldn't handle it." Emma was silent for a long time, processing the information. Rose was arrested an hour later. The prosecution charged her with manslaughter, not first-degree murder, given the circumstances of the case. The trial lasted 3 months. The entire story of the Adams family became public knowledge. Peter Reed testified on Rose's behalf, admitting that their affair had destroyed the family. Emma also spoke out in defense of her mother, recounting the years Rose had sacrificed for her family. In the end, Rose was sentenced to 5 years probation and 2 years of community service. The court recognized that she had acted in the heat of the moment. A year after the tragedy, Emma enrolled in college in another state. She visited her mother regularly and maintained close contact with her. Rose sold the house in Shaker Heights and moved into a small apartment. She continued to teach, although many of her colleagues and students' parents treated her with suspicion. Peter Reed left Cleveland shortly after the trial. He couldn't stay in a city where every street reminded him of Philip. Detective Janet Cole retired 2 years after the Adams case. In her memoirs, she wrote that the case taught her an important lesson. Sometimes tragedies happen not because of malice or greed, but because of human despair and the inability to cope with the destruction of everything one believes in. The Adams house was demolished 3 years later. A playground was built in its place. No one in the neighborhood talked about what had happened there, but everyone remembered. It was a story about how people break under the weight of unfulfilled expectations and how a moment of anger can change everything forever.